and welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel. In this video, I will show you how to make the fur-lined knit cowl. This cowl is sumptuous and sensual and uber soft. I cannot wait for you to get this yarn on your needles and make this luxurious cowl. Let's talk about the yarn a little bit, because with this cowl, it's all about the yarn. In this cowl, you will use 8 ounces of Hygge yarn and 7 ounces of Hygge fur. Now, I do want to point out that if you purchased the Hygge yarn when it first came out, it actually came out in a smaller amount. So make sure you're using 8 ounces of the Hygge yarn. So if you have the smaller amount, it will take 2 balls, but if you have the 8-ounce ball, it'll just take the 1 ball. Along with these 2 yarns, you need 2 sets of needles, a pair of size 10 24-inch circulars and a pair of size 10.5 24-inch circulars. It might not seem like that much of a difference between the 10 and the 10.5, but you absolutely need those 2 needle sizes, okay? Beyond that, you need the normal accoutrement for knitting, a tapestry needle, stitch marker, scissors, and the free pattern. That free pattern can be found at yarnspirations.com. I've put a link to it in the video description box right down there below. And you know the drill. When you're down there, please smash that like button, as my kids say. Once you have your free pattern and your materials, why don't you join me back here and I will show you the left twist stitch that you need to know. I will show you how to do the mattress stitch to join the 2 pieces of the cowl. And I will show you an alternative way to join the cowl, which I actually prefer and I'm doing on my own, so I can't wait to show you how that works out. This will not be a long video, so grab your needles and your yarn and that pattern, and let's get started. Let's jump right in. First things first, you will use your larger needle to cast on 105 stitches of the Hygge yarn. I will give you a little tip. If you leave the tail long enough to where you have a nice long tail, you can use this tail to seam the inner lining of the cowl later. And so mine isn't quite long enough, but if it were, all I would do is wrap it up just like so, and then just make a little butterfly out of it so that way it is out of the way, but I have it to use later on. Oops, that's just a little bit too short. I have it to use later on should I want to use that to seam things up so I don't have to join new yarn. So that's a little tip. If you leave the length of your tail long, you can use that to seam. Now, I did use the long tail cast on because I like this nice edge that it gives when you do the long tail cast on. Once you do the cast on, you jump into round 1, and round 1 is just like all other odd rounds. You will knit your knits and purl your purls. Specifically, you will purl 2 stitches, knit 5 stitches, purl 2 stitches, knit 5 stitches. And that is the repeat. It's a 7-stitch repeat for the outer body of the cowl. It's fairly easy. All of the special stitches or left twist stitches are done in that stockinette portion of the cowl. Can you see that nice little line of stitches right there? Those are created by doing what's called a left twist. It's a very easy stitch. We're just going to knit the stitches out of order, and the first one we're going to knit through the back leg. Let me show you. I am at the point where it's time for me to do my left twist in these first 2 stitches, and this would be round 2 of the pattern. So what I want to do is I'm going to take my right hand needle, go into the back leg of that 2nd stitch. Can you see that? And now I'm going to knit it. Now I have to take my right hand needle, go into the front leg of the first stitch because I don't want to leave it behind, right? I want to make sure it gets knit, otherwise it'll fall off my needle and become a run in my knitting. So now I knit through the front leg of the first stitch. So I have 2 stitches and I went into 2 stitches. So now I can let these 2 stitches on my left hand needle just jump off. Okay? So that is the left twist. See how the resulting stitch, it is elongated and it's kind of leaning towards the left. I love this stitch pattern. I think it is so wonderful. Once you do the left twist, you finish off your repeat, which would be knit 3, and then you work the repeat again. Purl 2, do the left twist, so I go into the second stitch through the back leg and knit it, go into the first stitch through the front leg and knit it, and off, and finish my repeat. I would do this all the way around for round 2. Round 3 is an odd round, so once again, I would purl my purls, knit my knits, so I would purl 2, knit 5 the whole way around. And when I get to round 4, that's when my left twist actually moves over 1 stitch. Whereas before I was working the stitches, the first 2 stitches after the purl. When I get to round 4, it'll be not this one, but these 2. So I'm going to jump ahead here. Let's pretend I'm on round 4. So I will purl 2. This would be my repeat. And then this would be round 4. I would purl the first, or knit the first one. And then with the next 2 stitches, I would create my left twist. I went to the back leg of the second stitch and knit, the front leg of the first stitch and knit, and off. And I finish my repeat with a knit 2. What that does, see the elongated stitch right there? If this had the first one done, it would be right here. And so the elongated stitches all stack on each other and give that really great look. Okay, on round 6, because remember round 5 would be just knit your knits, purl your purls. Round 6 is when you would do a knit 2, and then you're to these 2 stitches and you do your left twist. I'm going to give you my disclaimer here. Of course, you wouldn't do all of this that I'm doing right now on one round. These are different rounds. I'm just showing on one little sample. After you do your left twist, you would knit that last stitch. See how that gives a nice lean? You would go ahead, finish round 7, and then round 8, I'm sure you get it by now, you would knit 3. And over here, you would go into the back leg and then the front leg. And of course, you're knitting both of those legs, and it leans. All right, so as you are going and doing each round and moving that left twist over those 5 stitches, remember that you are going to do that plain round without the left twist every odd round. You get this nice line. And you will repeat that pattern, rounds 1 through 8, until your cowl measures 12 inches. Now, if you want to make yours a little bit longer, you absolutely could. It just requires more yarn. If you want to make yours a little bit shorter, you absolutely could. Just make sure you end after a round 8. That's for all of the different measurements, no matter what you choose. Just end after a round 8. When you do that, your piece looks a little something like this. Oh, this is so pretty. So I ended after mine measured 10.5 inches. And I hope you can see here the nice lines that I get here that are leaning to the left. And remember, this is a sort of ribbing, those purl 2 stitches. So as I expand my cowl, look at how much space I get here. Okay, so we have to make sure we are accommodating that when it's time to do the fur portion. Okay, so once this measures the measurement you want and you are finished with a round 8, the pattern indicates that you are then supposed to bind off in pattern. All that means is on the left-hand needle, if you're looking at a knit, you knit it. If you're looking at a purl, you purl it. And then you work the normal bind off. You should know how to do that by this point. It's really not that difficult. After you do that, it says you're supposed to go ahead and grab your Hygge fur and your smaller needles and cast on 98 stitches with the Hygge fur. So with the Hygge fur, you can see here that the yarn does look like fur. It is an eyelash yarn. It is so pretty and luxurious when it is knit up. You can see here in my little swatch, it is just so squishy. And the front and the back look identical. Okay, this is a stockinette stitch swatch and you can't tell what is the front or the back. The biggest thing when you're working with Hygge fur, again, I like the long tail cast on, so I'm just going to cast on a couple stitches here, is there is that nice sort of centering portion of the Hygge fur, and that is the portion that I try and find with my fingers as I'm working along with my knit project. So I just sit here and I get everything cast on. And then when it's time to knit, of course, you would be in the round here. Again, you would have to knit in the round. And when you have to find the stitch, I put my finger over top of it and I just feel for that sort of center cord. And then I make sure that I'm in that cord and I knit. It's fairly simple. The biggest thing to remember when you're working with this yarn is you do not want to drop a stitch because it will be nearly impossible to find it and pick it up. So just make sure you're always in that stitch before you knit it. Could you use a lifeline with this project? Absolutely you could. If that's something you want to do, you would simply just add your lifeline through those stitches and carry on. Now, when you get these stitches cast on and you're working in the round, you are just going to continue working in stockinette stitch. Now, stockinette stitch in the round is just knitting. So you're just going to knit, 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 essentially a tube that is the same size as your cowl. So in the pattern, the cowl is 12 inches. So the outer cowl is 12 inches. So the inner cowl, the inner portion with the hookah fur would be 12 inches. My example, mine is 10.5 inches. So my inner portion would be 10.5 inches. Okay. Once your inner and outer cowls are complete and bound off and all of that good stuff. So yes, you bind off the inner cowl with the hookah fur once it reaches the final measurement. That's when the pattern tells you to place the inner cowl inside the outer cowl with the wrong sides facing. So you have the right side facing on the outside and the right side facing on the inside. And then they want you to do a mattress stitch to join the two pieces together. The mattress stitch with these two pieces would be something like this. So let's imagine this was a tube. And we would want to take this tube, we would place it inside of our cowl here, okay? So this would be the wrong side of my fur, but again, it doesn't matter. They both look the same. But I put it on the inside of my outer cowl. This is my outer portion with the lines. And then I'm supposed to do a mattress stitch joining these two pieces together. Now, this would be stitches to stitches, and the pattern indicates that it wants you to use your color A, so it would be the Hygge yarn, to mattress stitch these together. Now, if you are like me, you're probably like, how are you supposed to be able to see the stitches, especially on the Hygge fur? Like it's nearly impossible. We already talked about that. So I will show you how to do this with the Hygge yarn first. Okay, so we have the Hygge fur inside of the Hygge yarn. So the inner cowl is inside of the outer cowl. I need to bring the inner cowl out a little bit so that way I can get to these stitches and mattress stitch them to these stitches. When you do mattress stitch, typically what you do is you come over here and you would find the stitch over here and you would go underneath two V's, okay? And you would pull that through. And then you come back to this side and you would go underneath two V's and pull that through. And then you come back over here and you go underneath two V's. You can find them. It's really difficult though. And then come back and then so on and so forth. So I go underneath two V's over here and just stitch it all together, making sure that the lining is nice and even, the inner lining with the outside, okay? Can you see how that just brings the two together? It makes it look virtually seamless. Now, I'm not deaf. I know it's really impossible to see how these stitches are going into the Hygge fur. So let me go ahead and bring in another little swatch so you can see how the mattress stitch works in case that's the route you want to go. Okay, so I'm removing the Hygge fur. Let me bring in this swatch. So let's pretend this is my Hygge fur and I have it in there. I'm bringing it out a little bit so that way I can get to my stitches. I will thread my Hygge yarn and I will start. So this is where I'd come over here and I want to make sure I'm picking up two V's, pull that through, come back here, pick up two V's, pull that through, come back over here, pick up the next two over, come back over here, pick up the next two over. It's a little tricky. You have to find where they are. Make sure you're getting them all in the same direction. I I think I am. And then you just carry on like that. It's when you're working with stitch to stitch, okay? Now remember, we only did 98 for the Hygge fur, but we did 105 with the Hygge yarn. So you won't have stitch for stitch. So you'll have to skip a couple here and there. But for the most part, that's how you would join it together. See how it's a virtually seamless join. All of the extra bits would be on the inside when it's all done, and your piece would be all joined together. Now you would do this both to the cast on edge to the cast on edge, and then the bind off edge to the bind off edge. Pretty simple, right? You know how to knit the left twist, you know how to knit and stockinette, and now you know how to do the mattress stitch to join it all together. Makes it really easy. Here is where I like to make it even easier, at least for me. Taking a look at the full aspect of my fur-lined cowl, here is my outer portion completed. And what I did is when my needles were still on my outer portion, I took my smaller set of needles, let's pretend it were these, it's actually these ones, but if it was these, and all I did is I knit my first round with my smaller set of needles with my different yarn. And then I carried on. Now there's a couple things to think about when you are going to do it this way. Here's the first one. You are transitioning from the Hygge yarn to the Hygge fur, and the stitch count is going to be different. So you have to figure out how many stitches you need to decrease in order to get to the right stitch count. Lucky for you, I did the math. Yes, I did math. It's a big deal. If you've been following along, I don't like math. So let's look at this together. So I called this the alternative join. We did 105 stitches with color A, and we need 98 stitches with color B. That's a 7-stitch difference, okay? So if I take 105 and divide it by 7, that means every 15th stitch needs to be decreased. Pretty simple stuff, but what does that mean in knitting talk? Well, all that means is this. You would knit across 13 stitches, and then stitch number 14 and 15 you would knit together, thus getting rid of stitch number 15. So you would knit 13 and then knit 2 together, knit 13 and then knit 2 together all the way around for that first round. And then you'll have 98 stitches on your smaller needles with your new yarn, and you'll be ready to go. Pretty cool, right? So that's the first thing you need to think about. The second thing you need to think about is one of the cautions I've already given you. Dropping a stitch in the Hygge fur can be really scary because it's hard to find. And now your portion with the Hygge fur is attached to the Hygge yarn. So if a stitch drops here, it could continue on all the way down the body of your cowl, and we don't want that. So here is my tip. Before you transition to the Hygge fur, add a lifeline right through the stitches of your Hygge cowl. It's super easy. I'll do it now even though I've already done the attachment, but just so you can see here, all you would do is take your tapestry needle and a contrasting color of yarn, and going through the left leg, see how it's a V right there? Okay, I'm gonna go through the left leg, and I would just do that all the way around. And as I do that, I am going to pull my string through, and now all of those stitches are on sort of a safety net. So if I should drop a stitch, it's not going to unravel all of my cowl here. I have it all safe in place. When your project is done, you simply remove the lifeline, and you have your nice stitches there ready to go. Pretty cool, right? All right, so those are 2 things you need to remember. The last thing you need to remember is that as you're working along, you want to make sure that your Hygge fur section, your inner cowl, ends up the same length as your outer cowl. And when it's all complete, you then will bind off these stitches and sew them to down here. Pretty cool, right? I've already eliminated one of your mattress stitch sections. I think that is brilliant. But here's another tip. When we sew this part to this part down here, what does that mean? That means that we are going to, let's just fold this in so we can see. If we have it all plain Jane, everything is even, then my white and blue, they really aren't going to show too much, right? Well, for me, I really want the blue to show, so I'm probably going to pull it up a little bit more, which means this edge here is going to tuck in more, which means my raw edge, which would be connected right here, is going to be hidden. So why would I take all that time to do the mattress stitch when I could just do a whip stitch, whip it all together, and call it good? Because I'll just hide that end on the inside. Brilliant. I just made it even easier for you. If you do want to do the mattress stitch, or you want to do some sort of an invisible seam, you can even grab some sewing thread and a sewing needle and sew the two pieces together to make it invisible. But for me, I really like the idea of having this fur up a little bit higher and having my seam tucked inside and doing that whip stitch. For the very reason that we talked about, seeing these stitches right here on the fur to seam them together with the hygge is really hard. So whip stitching them together is going to be my answer. Once you have all of your stitches bound off for the fur portion, you then would go ahead and tuck the fur portion into the hygge portion. Now remember, the hygge fur, it's really hard to see what's the right side or wrong side. They look identical. So it's really not going to hurt you no matter what you put in. Now I do have a tail here because I had to cut my yarn, but I'm good. I'm just going to tuck that in. Once your portions are tucked one inside the other, this is when you would do your join. Now you can see here, this pops up just a little bit there at the top. And then when we do the join down here, if I want it to be invisible, that's when I would do my mattress stitch, or I could just do a whip stitch and tuck it up a little bit more and have more of my fur coming out on the top. Now for me, as I said, I could use a whip stitch or I could use a mattress stitch. Either way I choose, the cowl is going to be perfect. But let me show you how to do the whip stitch since I did show you how to do the mattress stitch. For the whip stitch, I would go ahead and I got a length of yarn because I didn't leave a long enough tail on the outer portion. And I will just get it started on the inside here, okay? And now with the inner cowl pulled out a little bit just so I can see it, I am going to grab a stitch somewhere on the bind off edge, okay? And then I'm just going to begin to whip stitch. So I will whip it and whip it good, right? And you just kind of grab a piece out here, grab a bit in here, and pull it together. Grab a piece out here, grab a bit in here, and pull it together. Now you can tell I'm not going stitch for stitch. I'm just grabbing a little bit here and a little bit there and going as consistent as possible, just seeing how it looks here. And I haven't pulled it super tight yet. So once I pull this nice and snug, let's see what it looks like. It's virtually impossible to see, right? It's pretty easy. It's not that big of a deal. And if this portion was tucked into the inside, it's really not going to show. And here it is, the finished fur-lined knit cowl. Look how great that seam looks. It's really invisible, especially when I tuck it inside of the cowl to let the fur portion out a little bit more on top. Oh my gosh, this is so soft and squishy. I can't wait to see yours. I told you this project was really easy. You only need to know a couple stitches and a basic seam and you can create your very own fur-lined knit cowl. These yarns come in many different colors, so the color combinations are endless. I chose the white and the blue because I am a Colts fan here in America, and they are the same colors as my son's high school football team. So I will be able to wear this on the sidelines cheering on those Royals with pride. I'm Marley Bird. This is the Marley Bird YouTube channel. You can find more videos just like this one right here, so make sure you check them out when you get a chance. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and I will talk to you all again real soon. Bye. Hey, thanks for joining me today on the channel. If you want more videos just like that one, check out some of these other videos that I've already handpicked for you. And don't forget to hit subscribe so that way you're up to date whenever I release a new video. And don't forget, smash that like button, as my kids say. Bye guys.